Hello and welcome to Changemakers, a podcast from Civil Service World. I'm Suzannah Brecknell, editor of Civil Service World, and in this series I'm meeting people who are doing innovative things, making change happen across government and the wider public sector. It's easy when we're talking about innovation to move straight to tech, in particular to AI, which is both a genuine force for change and a pretty big buzzword at the moment. But the conversation will almost always move on to people, culture, skills, to the processes that people follow and the organisations they have built for themselves. Even the simple fact that change can be really hard for people. In this series, our aim is to delve into that process of change and discuss how it's happening rather than just what is going on. So I'm very excited in this episode to be taking something of a deep dive into how one department is approaching AI in a rather unusual but very human-centred way. I have with me Sam Rose, Director for Data and Advanced Analytics at the Department for Transport, and she is going to talk to us about what she calls the wrapper which DFT have put around their AI adoption work. Sam, before we get to that, I'd like to know more about you. You're in the DFT now, but where did your civil service career start? How has that shaped your approach to innovation?
Well, hi, Suzannah, and thank you for coming to speak to me. I'm really excited to tell you all about the work that we do here in the DFT. So I joined the civil service back in 2008 into the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory as an analyst and did a lot of analytical jobs in the very operational bits of MOD at the time. So obviously back then we were in Operation Herrick and Operation Talek, so I was regularly deployed out into the front line with military headquarters. And I think there are two bits of that experience that have really shaped my approach to innovation. So firstly is the tools I had available, not very many. It was largely Excel, so VBA and Access, and that was about it. So anything I wanted to do, I had to be very creative about how I was going to do that. And the second thing, I think, is all about risk appetite. So I think growing up in the operational bit of MOD as an analyst where the work that you were doing was informing decisions that ultimately could have had life or death consequences really does centre your risk appetite. So I think moving to the DFT 6 years ago, I think I'm probably seen as slightly more willing to take a little bit of risk, but that's because I'm firmly centred back on what is the impact of getting it wrong. So when I'm taking a judgment about how fast to go or how far to go, I'm obviously referring back to those experiences, which really put things, I think, in a quite a different perspective.
That's really interesting. Thank you. So let's go a little deeper into DFT's approach to AI adoption. So can you tell us what that is and how it came about?
Sure. So we have what we call a very holistic approach to our AI program. And what that means is we've got our technical strand, which is the kind of build, buy, deploy bit. We've got governance. So are we doing it properly and are we assuring it? But then we've got what we're calling making DFT AI ready. And that's our kind of behavioural science-led approach to making sure that it's not just about getting the tools out there, but we're really thinking about what that means for the people, what changes we need to make to workflows and the way people do their roles, and how these tools are going to interact with the kind of human element in the department.
Okay, so this is your approach. You know you want to take this approach, and you are the head of DFT's data science and operational research profession. So did you have all the skills you needed right here in the department, or did you find there were gaps that you needed to fill to kind of take this approach?
I had a really great team of technical data scientists, but I didn't have a focused behavioural science social researcher who could 100% be deployed to this project. So we've obviously got some great social researchers and behavioural scientists in the department, but there's not enough of them and they're stretched very thinly. And of course, I was looking for that overlap between a fundamental understanding of AI technology and a background in kind of behavioural science and social research. And I managed to find that overlap over in a fabulous human called Anna Wheelock in the ONS and managed to poach her over to the DFT on a loan.
So lovely. We're going to look at your approach now through three specific projects. For the listeners, these are not in the order that these projects happen necessarily or the stage that they're at, but it's sort of trying to identify how you use that approach at different points around the change process. And obviously we start at the beginning with how do we identify the opportunities. So let's talk about DOT. What's the problem that DOT was trying to answer?
Okay, so I said before that we've got a really great team of technical data scientists deploying the tools, but what we didn't have was a systematic and robust way to identify and prioritise those opportunities and to really understand and measure the impact of them in terms of productivity and quality, but also user satisfaction.
And so how did you go about answering that question solving that problem?
So as I said, we didn't have a systematic approach to this, so we didn't have any data for the DFT. But Anna, through her previous work over in the ONS, knew all about the time use survey. And she organised a collaboration between the DFT, the ONS, and of course the Alan Turing Institute, who bring lots of specialist skills in this space to be able to create that approach, to be able to systematically measure, but also identify the size of those kind of productivity savings, and therefore we could prioritise the work. And you'll hopefully have seen the first wave of that published a couple of weeks ago. That isn't very DFT heavy, but the second wave of that research we've just received the data for, and DFT represents 60% of that data set. So the first bit is useful, and we used it as a proxy, and now the second set will be very specific to us and will add a huge amount of value.
And for listeners who have not connected the dots, DOT is Department of Transport, ONS and the Turing Institute.
Absolutely.
I think what sounds great about that as well is that it's something you have built with those partners, but it's not an approach that is specific to DFT. So it's something people could borrow.
Exactly. So the whole point of creating that process is it's something that can be lifted and shifted and used in any other government department or organisation.
Okay, so DOT is thinking about how do we identify opportunities for change. And let's think next about your piloting or rolling out an AI project. How does your holistic approach shape the way that you evaluate AI?
So it starts at the very beginning when we're talking to people in the department about what they might need and what process we're looking at. So developing that theory of change, what impact are we going to have? And then because lots of this essentially will become a service or a system or a product, we're looking at user research. Because it's not just about can the technology do the thing that we need it to do. It's about does it do it in the way that works for the human and that the human is able to interact with. And of course, we use all of that once we're in the pilot phase when we are deploying those social research skills to really understand how it's working once it's kind of in the field.
Yeah, comes back to this concept that this whole series is about not just what is the change that's happening, but how is it happening for the people who are experiencing that change. So the last project that we'll cover, which I'm really interested in, is work you've been doing to map sort of the behaviours of an AI-ready department. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. So this is the best project because everything has to have a name in the DFT. And this is looking at behavioural mapping and systems mapping of what the behaviours would be for an AI-ready department. And what that allows us to do is then compare that to now, identify our areas of strength and weakness, and then be able to design those really targeted interventions.
And how has that mapping fed into other parts of your work in terms of AI adoption across the department?
I think it's helped us to prioritise our activities. So a big signal that we got from the mapping exercise was that we needed to deliver some very specific training. And it wasn't that there wasn't training available, but I think the sense within the department was that they wanted something that really resonated with them and was very specific to transport. So we worked with an external partner to deliver what we're calling our kind of Transport AI Essentials training, which is now launched across the DFT group. I think the second thing that it's highlighted is the importance of communications and engagement and people needing to feel like they know what's going on. And so we've brought an engagement specialist from elsewhere in the department to really help us on that journey in terms of defining what we need to do and when we need to do it.
We've spoken about how you are using this behavioural science and social research approach to explore where the opportunities are, to evaluate how those changes feel to the people involved, and to think about what does an AI-ready team, what behaviours do they exhibit. We've spoken about that kind of approach, I think, from start to end, but I also want to give people listening an idea of actually what is DFT using AI for. So could you give us one example of something the department is doing with AI that you think is exciting?
Sure. So my favourite example, because it's a little bit different to everything else you would have heard from central government and because it's transport specific, is we have deployed computer vision in a counter fraud example. So when you have an electric vehicle charge point installed, your installer submits a grant application to the department and they claim money back on your behalf. And that grant application comes with an image of that charge point. What we've built is an ability to check that image against any similar images, taken maybe from a different angle, same house, same charge point, but, just a little bit of angle or distance, but also check it against any other image that would be found on the internet.
And that sounds like it's something that is quite complex and would take a very long time to do without AI. What kind of savings are we talking in terms of time?
So this is something that you wouldn't be able to do as a human. So the team have calculated that it would take over 100 person years to do that A/B comparison of every image against every other image.
Wonderful example also of using AI in a way that's kind of tying into reducing fraud there, aren't you? So it's something that we all know is important. As you've been running these projects and developing this approach, has there been anything unexpected, for better or worse, that you've discovered along the way?
So I think I always knew there was going to be a spectrum in terms of people's appetite for this technology. But I think I've been quite surprised by the sheer level of resistance in some areas. But then equally, I've been massively impressed with the ability of my technical team to grow skills almost as quickly as this technology is changing. And the appetite in the broader department, where people are starting to identify their own opportunities and their own examples of where they think AI can add value to the work that they do, but also to their broader sector and policy areas.
And this brings us brilliantly back to the beginning, because now you are building the evidence base with Dot. You can say, okay, here's your example. How does that map against the evidence that we have on, automatable tasks and so forth?
Yes, exactly. So when these use cases pop up, we can kind of look at what size of the prize that they might give us, and therefore prioritise our interventions appropriately.
Dot, the tranche of it has already been published, and I think people can find that on the Turing Institute website. The behaviour mapping, is that something people can look at and learn from?
Yep, absolutely. It's now on gov.uk.
And apart from looking at those two pieces of work and learning from your approach, do you have any other piece of advice for people who are trying to drive change in the public sector?
I think if I was to say one thing, it's to be bold. I think making change is difficult. It's never the easy path to take. But I think it's really important that we have people in government willing to look at things a little bit differently and willing to try and make those changes where those changes are to improve public services or our own productivity and efficiency.
And you've recognised that it is hard to be bold in any context, but particularly in government. How, as an individual, do you find that resilience or resource to be bold?
I think it's about the people that you're surrounded by giving you that energy and support to do so. So the DFT, if I can say this, is a fabulous place to work. And I feel that when I am coming out with what might sound like a slightly ridiculous idea for something, people have a lot of time for it.
Beginning, the middle and the end of this conversation was people. We started with how do people experience change? We spoke about some of the ways you are using behavioural science and social research to understand people and how they can get AI ready. And we've ended with the importance of the people around you to help you make that change. Thank you for taking the time to explain all of that to us today.
Thank you for coming to talk to me.
And thank you to all of you for listening. I hope that's given you some inspiration for the changes you are trying to drive in government. Do subscribe to the Civil Service World podcast feed to receive the next episode of Changemakers directly to your feed.